Since the last episode was focused on happiness and positivity, let's go the opposite direction for this one. We'll start with a disclaimer right up front. Both of these scenarios are very unlikely, and this video is mainly intended as a fun, if dark, thought experiment. With that in mind, let's tackle the question, which is more likely, World War III or a Second American Civil War? Let's start by looking at what it takes to cause a world war. World War I, which lasted from July of 1914 through November of 1918, was sparked largely by the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. However, the Great War likely wouldn't have become the massive global conflict that it did had it not been for the complex and interconnected series of treaties, agreements, and strategic alliances formed in the years beforehand. To keep things simple, we'll leave out specific countries and just use letters. If Country A declared war on Country X, and Country Y had an agreement to defend Country X in the event of conflict, you now have a three-party war instead of simply one-on-one. This type of agreement is pretty common, but the issue here was that so many countries across Europe and around the world had entered into such agreements, and before too long, everyone found they were obligated to join in. World War I was incredibly devastating, killing an estimated 9 million combatants and 7 million civilians as a direct result of the war, and tens of millions more in the following genocides and disease outbreaks. It was dubbed the war to end all wars, but spoiler alert, it wasn't. Just over 20 years later, the unresolved rivalries and bitterness led to the deadliest conflict in human history, World War II. This one lasted from September of 1939 through September of 1945, and cost the lives of an estimated 50 to 85 million people. World War II saw some of the most brutal massacres the world had ever seen, the inhumane genocide of the Holocaust, complete obliteration of entire cities through constant bombing, and the only use of nuclear weapons in war. While it's difficult to say what exactly the necessary ingredients for global war are, we know that defense agreements can lead to the inclusion of countries that might otherwise not be involved, and that humanitarian crises have the potential to spark enough outrage to merit further involvement. One thing that has changed significantly since the two world wars is the superpower status of various nations. A superpower, in this sense, refers to a dominant country able to exert significant influence or project power on a global scale. This power can be both military and economy-based. The term was first used to describe the British Empire, the Soviet Union, and the United States in the aftermath of World War II. Shortly after the Second World War, however, the UK's status was greatly diminished, leaving only the US and the Soviet Union as the world's two superpowers. When the Soviet Union dissolved in 1991, the US became the sole remaining superpower. If you had to guess, which of these would you expect to be the most stable? The general consensus, perhaps surprisingly, is when there's only one superpower, as there is usually less of a threat of another global power deciding they want to jockey for the top spot. This is why the Cold War was such a terrifying time. Two superpowers diametrically opposed to one another and neither willing to back down. It's a miracle we didn't nuke ourselves into oblivion. Now, however, even as Russia and the United States conduct extensive espionage and cyber intelligence operations against one another, there's little chance of all-out war because the outcome is fairly certain. Russia is a big country, but it's not as strong as Vladimir Putin would have the world think. The United States and its large network of allies control the vast majority of the world's economy and military forces. This makes for a fairly stable geopolitical stage, because, for better or for worse, no one wants to mess with the US and by extension countries like France, Germany, and the UK. The one path that's even remotely likely would be if nations around the world continue to elect far-right nationalist candidates, which historically has made for very tense intergovernmental relations. Leaders like Donald Trump, Hungary's Viktor Orban, and Jair Bolsonaro of Brazil offer reactionary policies that resonate with unreasonably fearful citizens. And groups like Liga in Italy, Germany's AfD, and the National Rally in France all represent a significant uptick in nationalist, sometimes extremist ideology. If these groups gained power and decided that it was time for some good old-fashioned ethnic cleansing, or that the European Union was a bad thing and needed to go, then we could see a potential path to a large-scale conflict, though without the mass mobilization of troops we saw in the World Wars. The more likely scenario, in America at least, would be violent dissent from within its own borders. As vocal as far-right groups are, they're still in the minority in the United States. They're outnumbered at protests, rallies, and demonstrations, and generally don't represent the overall sentiment across the country. If the president, whether Donald Trump or some future leader, decided to engage in military activity in such a way that violated the American sense of decency, and certainly if we began to see ethnic cleansing of any sort, we might expect to see violent reactions from the rest of the population. However, societal unrest on a scale large enough to spark revolution is nearly unheard of in countries where the economy is fairly stable and where most people live lives of relative comfort and convenience. The people of the United States are largely happy, healthy, and free to pursue their own interests. Why would they risk all of that to fight with their neighbors? Here we get into a frog in boiling water scenario. As we've seen in the past, dictators tell you exactly what they're about, and yet the people somehow manage to ignore the warning signs until their nice, comfortable lives are completely upended. At that point, it's probably too late for any kind of civil uprising. If the government is fully in control of all aspects of society, and especially if the military is on board, there is almost no chance a bunch of 21st century keyboard warrior Americans are going to take up arms and attempt to overthrow the government. So essentially, there's a timeline, during which the American people have a small window to make a choice to do something unheard of and physically fight over the soul of the nation. And if that window passes, it becomes too late and civil war is no longer a real option. At that point, the most likely scenario is a lot of complaining, an economic downturn because nationalist countries are inherently selfish, then finger-pointing and yelling, and hopefully a change in leadership at the next available opportunity. With all that being said, what's the answer? Civil War or World War III? Realistically, neither is likely, but which is more likely is up for debate. We'll never see a conflict on the scale of World War II again. That kind of expenditure of human life simply isn't necessary with our modern technology. In the event that a third World War did break out, we would see a lot of propaganda, economic sanctions, and a series of smaller proxy wars in which the puppet masters offload the majority of the suffering to smaller, poorer countries that have little say in the matter. America reaching the tipping point of civil war seems unlikely, but we have seen a rash of far-right domestic terrorism very recently, and even a far-left attack in recent memory. Extremist rhetoric can very easily worm its way into the political mainstream, but whether it would ever be enough to get normal, apathetic citizens to take up arms against their fellow countrymen remains to be seen. What do you think? Could things ever get bad enough to spark a second civil war? Could international relations reach a flashpoint and trigger another global conflict? If you have any strong opinions one way or the other, leave your thoughts in the comments below.